So therefore, to find call A, this is the same thing as saying the call of what of A is the same thing as what the I, which is the value of I plus 4j, which is the partial of what Y plus 4k, which is the partial of what of Z. And then I have to say cross the vector A, which is what, which is x squared z squared minus 2y squared z squared plus x y squared z and what and k. So you have to take note of that. This cross this is the same thing as saying, let's say I, j and k, and we have the partial of what of x, and also d by the partial of y, and also by the partial of z. And don't forget, I have x squared and what z squared. So I have to put them in what, in matrix form, also in matrix form. So I have to put x squared z squared, x squared z squared. Also I'll put negative 2y squared and what and z squared. Also I'll put this, which is x y squared and what and z. So therefore I have to find the determinant of what of this whole matrix. So finding the determinant is the same thing as saying delete this, also delete this. We have to pick this and this, multiply this by this, also subtract by this if we are going to find g. And for k, I have to delete this and delete this. Then I will say this multiply by this, subtract by this, multiply by what, by this, if you are going to find for what, for k. So at the end, after doing that, I will left with this divided by what, the partial of what y. I will have x y squared z minus divided of what, minus d by the partial of what, of z, which is in bracket. I have negative 2y squared and also z squared. So I have to say this is for the value of what, for the value of I. So we have to go for the value of j. I have to say subtract by, open bracket, I have to say d by the partial of what, partial of x also, and therefore I have x squared y squared and what and z. Then I have to say minus the partial of what, of z, the partial of z, and multiplied by x squared and what and z squared. So I have to say x squared and z squared. So I need to have some space. Don't forget, this is for the value of what, this is for j. So we have to move forward for k. For k, I'll say plus the partial of what, the partial of x, and I'll have negative 2y squared z squared minus partial of y x squared z squared. So this is what for k. So the next thing that I'm going to do here is that I have to differentiate each. You have to differentiate this with respect to what? With respect to y, and also differentiate this with respect to z, and also differentiate this with respect to x, also differentiate this with respect to z, also differentiate this with respect to x, also differentiate this with respect to y. So after differentiating, at the end we will get 2xy z plus 4y squared z I. So this is all for the value of I. Then I have to say minus for the value of g. I have y squared z minus 2x squared z for the value of g. For k it is minus 0k, because I will end with 0. Because if I am to differentiate this, because this is k, this is for k, so if I am to differentiate with respect to x, there is no x, so this will now be the derivative of constant is 0. Also, if I am to differentiate this with respect to this y, at the end I don't have y, so 0 minus 0 is the same thing as 0. So therefore at the end this is the case that I find at last. So I need some space. So the next thing that you have to know is that I have the point, so I have to insert, this is the value of what? Of x, this is y, and this is z. You have to take note. I have to put the value of x and the value of y and the value of what? Of z. So at the end this should now become, I'll have 2, I'll put x. X is the same thing as what? As 1, and y is the same thing as -1, and z is the same thing as also 1, and y is the same thing as 1. If you substitute, you get the 2i plus j plus 0k. So this is the final solution of what? Of this question. You have to take a look to the question well and see. So this is the final solution to what? To this question. So I am given a vector A, so then I am to find del cross this vector A at what? At this point. So the del cross what? Cross A, which is the vector A, is the same thing as, I have to say I partial of x plus what? 4j, which is the partial of y, plus 4k, which is the partial of what? Of z, cross the value of what? Of the a. So therefore this is what? This is the vector A. So I will say x, which is z cube I minus 2x squared yz, which is j, and therefore plus 2y z power 4k. So the next thing that I'm going to do, I have to say this cross this is the same thing as I, j, and what? And k, which is d by the partial of x, d by the partial of y, d by the partial of z. Then I have to say x z cube, which is this, and also minus 2x squared yz, which is this, and then I have to say 2y z power what? Power 4. So you have to take note that The next thing that I'm going to do, I have to say I'll delete this, I'll delete this. So therefore, as I said, I'll delete this, I'll delete this. So after deleting this, I'm left with only this. So this multiplied by what? By this. So I would say the partial, open bracket, let me say the partial of what? Don't forget with this point, we are giving 0.1, -1, and what? And 1. Take note of that. So the partial of what? Of dy multiplied by this. So I have to multiply by, I have 2 what? 2y and what? And z power what? Power 4. So then I have to close the bracket. Then I have to subtract this and this. So multiply by the partial of what? Partial of this z multiplied by this -2x squared y z. So I am done with I. The next thing that I'm going to do, I have to done with the value of what? The value of j. Delete this and delete this. So I have to multiply. Let me write something here like this: d by dx, which is this, and d by what? By dz. I have xz cube, and also I have this, which is 2y z power 4. So then you have to take note for the value of k. For the value of k, I have to delete this and delete this, delete this and delete this. I'm only left with partial by the partial of x, partial by the partial of y, and also x with x cube, and also -2x squared y and what? And z. So you have to take note of that. Make sure you write it down. So therefore at the end, so I have positive sign here. At the end, I will left with d by dz. I will have x and what? xz cube minus d by dx. I will have 2y z power 4. So I'm done with the value of what? Of the g. Then I have to say plus, for the value of k, d by dx, open bracket, I have -2. Then I have x squared y z, close bracket, subtract by d by dy x z cube for the value of k. So the next thing that you have to notice is that this d by the partial of y, you have to differentiate each. d by dy, d by dz, d by dz, also d by, this is d by dy, d by dz, d by dz, d by dx, d by dx by dy. So you have to differentiate each part with respect to what you are given. So after doing that, at the end, I'll have 2 z power 4 plus 2 x squared y, which is for I, plus 3x. If I differentiate this, I'll get 3x squared, and the rest will be 0. So I'll have only g minus what? Minus for the value of what? Of the z. If I differentiate this with respect to x at the end, I will have what? The 2 should multiply to this 2. I'll have -4. Then I'm left with only x. Then I'll have y and what? And z for k. So this is all for the differentiation. So the next thing, I have the point. So I have to insert this point. After putting those points, I'll say 2, 1 power what? Power 4 plus 2. Also I have 1 power 2 minus what? -1. I'm done with I. And also plus, I have 3, which is x, which is 1. I insert it. Also 1 squared then I'm done with j. So then minus 4 of 1 and also negative 1 and also multiply by 1. This is for what? For the value of k. At the end, this is the same thing as 2. Also, this is the same thing as 2. And this multiplied by negative 1. At the end, I will have 2 minus 2. And it will now become 0. So therefore, I'll have this is the same thing as 0i. And therefore, if I find the solution of this, I'll get plus 3j. And also if I find the solution of this, I'll get positive what? 4. Don't forget I have negative sign in here. So therefore I'll have 4k. At what? At this point. So therefore this is what? This is a solution of what? Of this example 1.5. So how can we solve this question? We are to determine the call A at what? At the point given. As you all know, del cross what? Cross A is the same thing as I jk by the partial of what? Of x, d by what? dy, and also d by what? d by dz. And then we have to put the value of what? Z e to the 2xy, and also I have to put this value 2xz cos what? Cos y, and also I have to put this value which is x plus 2y. So as you can see, this is the same thing as finding the determinant of what? Of each. For I, delete this and delete this. For j, delete this and delete this. For k, delete this and delete this. Then multiply this by this and then subtract this by what? By this. So this is what I'm going to do. So the solution of this should now be this cross what? Cross A. Del cross A is the same thing as what? As the partial of what? Of y. After finding the determinant, you are just going to find the determinant, guys. Please don't be confused. Therefore minus d by what? By the partial of this z, and we have 2xz z cos y. So this is for what? For I. And also for j, I have to say minus d by dx, and I will have x plus 2y minus d by dz, which is z e to the 2x y. For what? For j, I have to say plus d by what? By dx, which is 2xz cos what? Cos y minus d by dy, which is z e to the 2xyk. Guys, you have to take note that you are just going to find the determinant of what? Of that matrix. You are what? You are just going to find the determinant of what? Of the matrix. In this point, if I differentiate this with respect to what? With respect to what? With respect to what should I going to get? I will end up with only what? With only 2, because if I am to differentiate this, I didn't have y. This should now become 0, but I only have 2 here, 2y. Sorry, I have 2y here, so I have to differentiate it. If I am to differentiate it, so it will now become only 2. The y will be set as what? As 1. So therefore, I will say 2, but this should now become 2. Then also you have to differentiate this with respect to z. Also differentiate this with respect to x, with respect to z, also with respect to x, and also with respect to y. So at the end, let me have some space. So this should now be equals to the del cross the vector a it is equals to 2 plus minus 2x cos y. So this is for I, then plus 1 plus 2y minus e to the power of what? 2xy, which is for the value of what? For the value of j. Also for the value of k, which is 2z cos y minus 2xz e to the 2xyk. Also at last del cross what? Cross a is the same thing as after inserting the point 2, 0 and what? 3. So this should now become negative 2i plus what? Plus 0j.